Well, I think a trade is definitely a great path. And a lot of the schools nowadays actually have some trade programs that'll steer kids into construction trades or plumbing, electrical, AC, stuff like that. And there's always going to be a need for trades out there.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to Retire in Texas, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Daryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Daryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of PAX Financial Group, and you're listening to Retire in Texas. Appreciate you tuning in. I always have to give you the disclosure that this information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific tax or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. And I want to remind you to visit PAX Financial Group, but if you wanted to connect with an advisor, all you have to do is put in Texas to the number 74868. That's Texas to 74868. So today, I'm excited to talk about somebody who retired from CPS, Todd Fleming. Todd, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is going to be fun because the municipal space has some interesting career paths, and so I have some curiosity questions. But before I jump into kind of the career path, are you originally from Texas?
I am.
Whereabouts?
Grew up in San Antonio. Was born in Dallas, but grew up in San Antonio.
Okay. What high school did you go to?
James Madison.
Madison High School.
Yep.
So after high school, did you jump into the CPS world right away, or?
No, after high school, I had an uncle that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he was in the newspaper business and had a big printing plant. And I went up there and worked for him for a while, still trying to find my path.
Yeah.
And decided Oklahoma was a great state, but wasn't where I wanted to be. So I came back and was fortunate enough to get on with an electrical contractor here in San Antonio. And from that, I happened to work with a gentleman whose father was a supervisor at CPS Energy, and he got me an interview, and so I transitioned over to CPS. I was still only 20 years old at the time, though.
So, yeah, that's what I was wondering. And the reason I was going there, CPS, for those that are out of San Antonio, is City Public Service. But where I was going with that is that you're relatively young, and so a lot of people who I've known over the years have been with CPS, and they've stayed with them for a long time. And so I'm going to get into that, but I'm going to rewind the clock a little bit. So understanding a little bit more about where you came from. So growing up in San Antonio, middle class, lower class, like poor, rich, what did it look like for your family? Parents around?
Yeah, my parents were divorced when I was fairly young. I think I was about 8. Lived with my mother primarily. I would say probably middle class at the time.
Yeah.
Grew up actually off Walsham Road. Behind Roosevelt High School.
Yep.
Over in that area. She was a nurse. We didn't have an abundance, but we had a good network. My grandparents lived in Windcrest area. They were close. And
that was where rich people live.
Helped support us. Back then it was.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah. And my dad was certainly in the picture, but I just didn't live with him, but we pretty regular visitations.
That's good. And brothers and sisters?
I had a brother and a sister growing up. I was the oldest. My sister was the second. Unfortunately, she passed when she was 14 years old.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just turned 14, yeah. But my brother, with him. And then later in life, my mother remarried, and I have a half-brother, and then my father remarried, and so I have a stepsister that I'm pretty close with, too.
That's a bunch of cousins, like, nieces and nephews. And
not a whole lot on that aspect.
Yeah,
I've got 2 nieces from my brother, and I've got 2 nephews from my stepsister.
How did the loss of your sister impact you?
Tremendous, because we were only 18 months apart in age.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she died of cancer.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, it was a pretty traumatic experience.
I can only imagine. And you were how old at the time?
So I was 15 at the time.
15, yeah, I was going to say right. And that's devastating. And so when you were growing up and you had, I know the neighborhood that you're talking about, it's middle class. It's, it's not Trailer Park or anything like that. But it's not Windcrest. It's not Dominion. It's not Alma Heights. When you graduated, were you good with your hands? Like you go in electrical engineering. Were there some things that you were doing in high school, fiddling with stuff that led you into kind of being in electrical engineering?
There was. Madison wasn't the school I was supposed to go to. Roosevelt would have been the school that I would have attended. But there was an ag a department at Madison, the FFA.
Yeah.
And they had a kind of an ag transfer type program. I think now they call them like magnet schools or something where they draw people in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was able to get into that program. So I came up through the agriculture, showing pigs and stuff, and having to do a lot of mechanical type stuff, assembling feeders and working on pins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also as some electives, took some welding and stuff like that. So yeah, it made me mechanical strong.
Yeah. You did some welding, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, assembling deer blind, all that stuff. I mean, I just get the blind. Now it's just, you're blind. If anybody's listening, you can get a blind off the shelf that's like, you could live in this thing.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time that you're talking about, I mean, we're talking kind of feeders and blinds, old school kind of the way of doing it.
Right.
But you would weld those things together?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, the mechanics of spitting out some of the feed, you'd be able to put those things together with the springs and all that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. The electrical connections and setting timers and all that stuff.
Why do my timers always off? Like, I don't get that. Like, I set it and then I go back and they're like 30 minutes, an hour off. Not because of the time change. It's like, what the heck happened?
No, it's hard to say. Those they're electromechanical, so they've got a little error in them.
Yeah, I figured that. Well, the reason I'm kind of going here a little bit more is because I'm curious to know about a problem that exists in the country and the state of Texas. I was recently up in Austin this week, actually. I met with the governor, I met with legislators, and the consistent issue that I've heard over the last 10 years is that there's not a pathway for those that are in a trade. And what we do is we kind of force everyone into a college, tradition, the 4-year degree program where people come out with maybe a major in philosophy or whatever, where in 9th or 10th grade, they should have learned a trade. And even though we've made progress in that space, there's still a huge gap. And so what we're seeing is a ton of business owners out there that are saying, I need skilled labor. I need people who can critically think, solve problems, and have a trade. What would you say to that?
I think that's absolutely right. There's so many kids today that are getting degrees there's not a really good field of work for them to go into. I mean, there's a lot of people say, a lot of Starbucks, a lot of the baristas have college degrees, but they just can't find a job in their field of work. So I think a trade is definitely a great path. And a lot of the schools nowadays actually have some trade programs that'll steer kids into construction trades or plumbing, electrical, AC, stuff like that. And there's always going to be a need for trades out there.
100%. You kind of ebb and flow where the changes in technology takes place. But if you're in the weeds, you'll find your way to where if the equipment changes, you'll learn the new equipment. I know when I was in Medina Valley and is where I went to school and I learned auto mechanics, I always thought that would be a great career because, even though obviously the automobiles have changed, if you're in that space and you're just constantly being curious, you'll grow with the technology. So you were 20 years at CPS or how many years?
No, I retired just shy of 35.
Okay, 30. So how old are you right now? So that would make you 55.
I'm 55 right now.
So think about that. The reason I'm kind of leading up to this, if people are picking up what I'm dropping, retired at 55. Like I know a lot of doctors, attorneys, a lot of people out there that would love to retire at 55. And I know it was a grind and I know it was a tough career, but you learned a trade and then you became valuable at CPS. Now, what I'd like to get at is tell me how your career at CPS started and then how it kind of evolved over those 35 years.
So my career at CPS, I was doing electrical work for a contractor prior. So I had a little bit of electrical background, but when I got hired in as a laborer on the heavy hauling crew. I mean, you're making barely over minimum wage. It wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah.
But it was a stepping stone. I got into there. CPS, back then, they had job postings, paper slips. Yeah. They were white typically, but if they had a pink slip, that means that you could apply even if you weren't through with your probationary period. So they had a call for electrician trainees, and I think they were hiring 14 positions at the time. So I applied and was hired as an electrician trainee. So that's kind of how that route went off into the electrical trade.
I mean, that's cool. Just the little decisions you made and kind of guiding you and man, then you turned out that it became a career. And so did you stay in that area of CPS or did it change?
So I was an electrician trainee for a little over 6 years. As a trainee, we rotate through some different shops and you're learning different, not trades necessarily, but different disciplines of CPS Energy. Transformer shop, the test shop, system protection shop, different stuff like that. So I was kind of fond of the testing shop. They do all the high voltage testing of the substation equipment, transformers, breakers, what have you. And so I was kind of fond of that. So after about 6 years of being a trainee, that position came open, and I applied and was fortunate enough to land that position.
So I got to ask you, have you ever been shocked?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
And so give me at least one story here.
And if he's ever listened to this, he's gonna tell a different version of it. Fellow tester and I, we were out on a job. He was testing bushings on a circuit breaker. These are high voltage bushings. He was testing them at 2,500 volts, so 2.5 kV. He's getting some bad reads. He asked me to check the connection. So I go to check the connection, made an assumption that he had turned his machine off. Well, he didn't. So when I touched it, it hit me, and it hit me hard. Luckily, my arm was touching the metal frame because the electricity went in my thumb and blew out through my arm. So I've got 2 small permanent holes in my arm.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So had you not been touching that electrical frame?
If I would have been touching with the other side of my body and it possibly could have went through my heart, it could have been bad. So.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. And so his side of the story was
that he didn't tell me to touch it. He just said, go see what's going on. Well,
yeah, okay. Gotcha. So when that happened, obviously it shocked you, for lack of a better word, or all pun intended, I guess. What did you do? Did you just hit you and then you just paused, or did you go see the doctor? Or
no, I didn't. It didn't require any medical attention or anything.
Yeah.
At the time, it probably, with the safety culture there now, yes, they would advise you to do that.
Yeah.
But no, at the time, it just kind of threw my arm back and, it shakes you up for a minute. And,
oh, man.
And you going.
I mean, as a kid, you touch electrical fences, just that alone. And I don't know, the voltage is low compared to that. I'd be freaking out. So did you stay in that lane the whole 35 years, or did you move into a management? I mean, you're kind of in a management role early to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, I was responsible. I had a trainee working with me, so I was over that.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But yeah, I was a tester for a while, and then, I moved into a supervisory role, and then I wound up being manager of the whole department.
Yeah.
So,
how long were you in management?
From when I became a supervisor, probably a little over 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. Then there comes a point in time where you look at your wife and you say, okay, I think it's time that I move on to the next chapter. What triggered that for you to consider retiring?
55 is kind of the benchmark, 55 and 35 at CPS, where a lot of people feel like that's kind of the time to get out. And so I was approaching that age. We were prepared financially. We were comfortable. It's, that's something you think about, plan for years ahead. And we'd gotten to that point. We met with our financial advisor. He ran the numbers on it. He said, you're good to go. Yeah. And so that's what helped us with the decision. Now, being retired from CPS doesn't mean I'm retired from doing anything.
That's exactly what I'm going to get to. I want to hear more about that. Was getting debt resolved a part of your plan, reducing your debt?
Yes. Early on, I had a plan, and I had it mapped out when I wanted my house paid for. And I wanted to retire comfortable without any lingering debt that's going to hold me back.
So there wasn't anything that triggered it in terms of, let me say this, the 35 number that you talked about, 55, that has something to do with your pension. So to be able to optimize the numbers for a pension, and for those that are listening, a lot of municipalities offer pensions. You might not get, as you had alluded to, you might not get the best wage initially. You'll get a fair wage, but the real kicker, and I know it takes a while for it to manifest, is that pension. So you'll get a pension. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I just haven't worked with CPS in a while, since I'm not necessarily an advisor like I used to be. But you'll get a pension for the rest of your life, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And so that's 45 years of getting a paycheck from a company. It's worth, we run present value calculations on that number. I mean, it can be worth at least $1 million, if not $2 million, if not more. And so it's a really sweet gig. So I say all that because those are listening that consider adopting a trade in their life, moving into a municipal role that provides a pension. You're the benefactor of that, and it's huge. But there wasn't a triggering event at CPS or elsewhere that you said, okay, it's time for me to retire. It was orchestrated, plan based on the numbers, right?
Correct.
Okay, because some people are like, oh, I had a heart attack and I realized the stress was getting me. Other people say, I just wasn't happy anymore. But for you, it's just a calculated, cerebral, I'm going to the numbers work, it's time to transition. Correct?
Correct.
I don't want to put words in your
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah.
So, okay. And so now what I like to say is you didn't retire, because retire by definition is the disposition of an asset over its useful life, but you're pivoting into a next chapter. What's that next chapter look like for you?
So it has both civic and work. I'm very involved with San Antonio Rodeo. I'm a chairman on a committee down there. So that's consuming my February, and it's a year-round commitment. So I'm going to do that. I really enjoy that. Mission of San Antonio Rodeo is to, help youth in agriculture, and so that's very rewarding. So, we contribute a lot to that, help them with their mission. I do have an opportunity to go back and do some contract work from my field in the electrical field. So I'm going to do some of that for a while. And then, I've got some interests. I've got some ranching interests. My son has a business, help him as well. So,
but you don't have to jump in anything.
No, I don't have to.
Oh, what a great position to be in. Man, congratulations.
Thank you.
So I want to go into a couple of those things, because you don't have to rush anything. You still have time. You still have youth. I know your back doesn't feel that way, but you still have youth. Mm-hmm. But the rodeo, how'd you get involved with the rodeo? And for those that are listening outside Texas, the San Antonio Rodeo is very legit. I mean, it's got to be one of the top 2 or 3 in the nation. I know Houston's huge, but where does it rank relative to the other ones?
It's right up there at the top consistently. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I love taking my family every year. So tell me how you got involved with the rodeo.
So I've always been in agriculture. I mentioned earlier when I was in high school, I started showing animals. So I've been involved with that since 1981. My kids came through the program and everything else. It's just a way to give back. I mean, the rodeo, the Western cowboy lifestyle, all that stuff is just always been a part and ingrained in me. And so I had an opportunity years ago through a friend to join the rodeo. I think it's been 21, 22 years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So just as a volunteer, San Antonio Rodeo is basically all volunteers. There's very few paid employees. So just volunteered and worked my way up to where now I'm chairman of the committee, and really enjoy what we do. We get to really support the scholarship program and the junior livestock auctions.
Oh, I love it. It's so much fun. It's a really, really important part of our culture. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, you're welcome.
And gosh, it's going by fast, but a couple more questions if that's okay.
Sure.
So your son's running a business. Tell me a little bit about that.
So he's in the exotic hoofstock wildlife business.
High fence.
Antelope, high fence stuff and stuff like that. And so he's got a breeding operation. And so I help him out. I help make deliveries for him and do some stuff like that. At times, I kind of joke around. I'm the vice president of taking care of the nursery. Yeah. We've got some animals that their mothers may not care for them real well. So I take them under my wing and bottle feed them and raise them up and stuff. So
y'all do exotic game hunts out there? Is that
no, he doesn't conduct any hunting. It's strictly a breeding and selling operation.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I know we've had a couple clients do that, and I went out there and got to see the operation. It's, people don't know that the care that's done for those animals is top notch.
Oh, it is, absolutely. It's you don't realize, like, our native white-tailed deer and species like that, they have the ability, they put on fat and stuff, so they can survive the winters just fine. The African game normally doesn't have that ability, so you've got to be diligent on your feeding program and stuff to get them prepared to survive the winters. Even people outside Texas may not think we get cold down here, but we do.
Did y'all lose a lot of axis in this last freeze?
We didn't lose anything. No.
Because y'all kept them fat?
Yeah, we kept them fit.
Yeah, because a lot of people lost at least half of what they were used to in the axis population.
No, we kept them fed. We have shelters. We put a propane-powered heat under them, and so they can get out of it. And everything made it through just fine.
Ah, so fun. That's fun. Yeah. So rodeo, helping your son, and you mentioned a third thing.
Contract back. Do some contracting in the electrical trades too. So.
Yeah, would that be with CPS or with?
It'll be ultimately for CPS, but through a sub.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. Yep, that makes sense. So I want to make sure people understand this. There's going to be a general contractor who's responsible for all the bidding and all the particulars, and then they go get the deals with CPS, and then they go find subs like you to help with, kind of get their team together, and that's your role, and you're talking about doing that going forward.
Yes.
To the degree that you want to, right?
Yes, it's not you're not obligated, but you have the ability to work.
So this is kind of an ideal scenario for a lot of people listening. I mean, and some people, you're older and you're saying, man, I wish I would have done this. And some people are just like, this is really cool. But the thing I want to really press on is for the youth is to know that this is really a cool career path that you're laying out. And I hope it inspires some people, because you didn't become an expert in a trade. You became curious in a trade. It opened the door for you to get it with CPS, not only with CPS, but to actually get in the lane that you wanted to get in. It became a career. You became a manager. You were able to retire at 55. Now you have the freedom to choose what you want. You can be a contractor, which is self-employed, means you get to pick your work. You're not forced to do it. Giving back to the community. I mean, I know it's not a perfect life, but this is a pretty good gig, especially for those people who are saying, I want to be in a trade. This is kind of the ideal scenario.
It is. Yeah. Real fortunate.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you had a supportive wife.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, that matters.
It does.
Got to give her some credit along the way too. The last question I have, and appreciate, first of all, you being here and sharing this with me, but the last question I have, probably most important question is, what's your favorite salsa?
Honestly, my favorite salsa is one I make myself. I like to make salsa at home.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I've got a kind of a recipe that I've developed that I really like. So I like a roasted type salsa.
Yeah.
So I'll roast garlic and onions in the pan with some olive oil and get a nice kind of that burnt flavor a little bit. Yeah. And then I'll mix in my habaneros and jalapenos and tomatoes, and I'll stew all them first.
Yeah.
And then blend it up, and it's just really enjoy it.
That sounds perfect. So do you like it hot?
I like it pretty hot, yeah.
And do you like it warm, like when you eat it?
Yeah, when I first cook it and blend it and it's warm, it's really good. But honestly, the heat comes on as it cools after you've stored it a little bit in the refrigerator. It seems like it gets hotter for some reason.
Ooh, I love it. Well, Todd, it's been good. It's been fun. I learned a lot about you. It really was inspiring. I hope other people learn it. I think for me, I was just at the Texas legislation thinking about this real issue. And I feel encouraged that there's a good career path for those people that want to be in a trade. And I think it's actually not only just an alternative, could be a very primary career path for many people. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that story and laying out that vision.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.